start webinar. Okay.
Oh, there we go. So hopefully we'll have a few attendees. It's late in the day here as well. But yeah, appreciate you all joining this conversation. All right, we have folks floating in. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to begin shortly. We're just giving some time for folks to join the conversation. Thank you for joining us. Maybe a couple of more minutes before we begin, if that's okay with you. Awesome. We have folks signing in. Amazing. Righty. I see it. I see the attendees tick up a little bit more. Hopefully we have a handful of you, double figures, hopefully 10, 15 folks. It would be nice to have you all in this conversation. So I'm going to give it a couple of more, maybe one more minute before we begin.
So Raf, as long as there's more attendees than panelists, I think it's a win.
Okay, yes, absolutely. At least, at least we'll hit that limit. Oh, there we go. I think we did it.
Ooh.
Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining once again. I am going to go over the sort of housekeeping rules really quickly while we have folks join us. So just wanted to let you all know that this Zoom call is being recorded. The presentations will be in English. I would really like to apologize about this, as this idea of doing this in English itself kind of goes against the spirit of the conversation. Also want to acknowledge our colleagues who are joining us from Lebanon and Jerusalem, where it's really late in the day for them. Again, that also goes against the spirit of what we're trying to do, but I hope you understand our limitations this time and hope we can do better. But we very much appreciate your participation in this webinar. If you could please make any comments or questions using the chat box, that would be appreciated. If for some reason that isn't working, we found that to happen in an earlier webinar. So please just use the question and answer tab Q&A box to ask your question or comment. I will surface these for the panelists. And then these are all at the bottom of your screen. And then I'll go through your questions and pick questions for the panelists after our sort of a roundtable discussion is kind of is done. Also, yeah, as I said, we very much look forward to engaging with you. So please write us in the chat if that's working. Hope that is working for the session. If not, again, put your comments as well in the Q&A section. I will surface them for my colleagues here. And in the meantime, again, it would be great if you could let us know, introduce yourselves, let us know where you're joining us from today, just so that we get a sense of who is in the space. And now that I've said that, I'll sort of start with the panel introductions, if that's okay with you. Okay, amazing. All right. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining this conversation once again. My name is Saurav Upadhyay. I am the research manager for learning and evidence at the Alliance for Peacebuilding. And in my role, I provide support and accompaniment to mostly local peacebuilding organizations as they go on their monitoring, evaluation, and learning journeys, as I like to call it. And in my experience supporting local organizations and in sort of research that we did alongside my colleague Jennifer at GLI, we saw that there's a great deal of interest and appreciation for monitoring, evaluation, learning, MEL, of course, in the humanitarian development and peacebuilding sector. There's a great deal of interest in having FPOs, religious, interreligious, multi-religious organizations do MEL. However, much of the MEL that is emphasized is we found it not to be faith sensitive, and we've found it to be dominated by sort of the epistemologies and practices and processes of global North institutions. This we see has led in many cases to divergence between sort of international institutions and actors and local implementing partners. And we've seen that this divergence is even wider when it comes to faith actors. And we see that this is because faith actors and international actors who are sometimes secular and are working within the secular frameworks often take different approaches to measuring success and ways of knowing, learning. They use different terminologies. They have conflicting priorities, objectives, goals for their MEL efforts. And we've also seen that this divergence can lead to sort of frustrations and tensions, and is often a very significant sort of barrier to meaningful collaboration. But while I say that, I've also seen a lot of efforts underway that is trying to prioritize local knowledge, where Global North institutions are trying to partner with local organizations to make MEL more accessible or faith sensitive. And hopefully in today's session, we will explore some of these initiatives, strategies that have been used to make MEL more inclusive. And then through this, I hope we will also learn about how Global North organizations can support locally led MEL, prioritize local knowledge, partners, and their perspectives. So having said that, I want to introduce 4 amazing panelists. The first panelist is Dr. Jennifer Eggert, who is the Senior Research Fellow at the Joint Learning Initiative for Faith and Local Communities. I'm gonna put everyone's more detailed bio in the chat as they are speaking. I hope that's okay. Second, I want to introduce Halima Ahmed, who's the Senior Research Associate and Facilitator with Dawa Institute Islamic Education Trust in Nigeria. Sharon Rosen, who is the Director of Religious Engagement at Search for Common Ground, and Antoine Abdelmaseh, who is the Program Manager at Dan Mission MENA. Antoine, I'm sorry if I did not say your name properly. I apologize. Feel free to correct me. This is going to be a roundtable format where I will ask a question, the first question to the panelists, and each one will have some time to offer their response. I will just go to the second panelist and third in that order. So let me start, if that's okay with you all, by asking the panelists to share their thoughts about this question. In your experience, what are some challenges that faith actors face in doing monitoring, evaluation, and learning efforts? So I will begin with Jennifer, if that's okay. And Jennifer, the floor is yours. We'd love to learn from you about the challenges that faith actors face.
Great, thank you so much, Soraf. And hi, everyone. It's so good to be with you all today, this evening, because I'm not quite based in Lebanon, but it's still late for me. Yeah, but I'm really excited to be ending the day with the panel and with all of you. So challenges of faith actors in doing MEL. Before I start speaking about some of the challenges that our partners report to us and that have come up in some of the research that we have been doing at JLI, I should probably add something to the question, and that's 2 little words: want to. So I'm going first of all, I'm going to say that I will speak about the challenges of faith actors that want to do MEL. Okay, and that's a really important point, because this is something that we came across in our research at JLI. Not everyone wants to do MEL. Not everyone is interested in MEL. Okay, and why is that? That's because not everyone works within Northern frameworks. Okay, so and I feel this is a really, really important point to start with. Okay, so lots of people who work with NGOs, who work with governments, they're just used to a certain type of working that's linked to a certain that's linked to a certain terminology and to a certain way of seeing the world, right? And that's not always in line with the perspectives of local actors in general and local faith actors particularly, right? And I've really noticed how difficult it can be to try and avoid this kind of language and these kind of perspectives when we were writing up a publication on partnerships with local faith actors, MEL partnerships with local faith actors, and I really struggled to avoid this NGO terminology that we've become so used to. Okay, but the reality is this is not a language everyone uses, and these are not frameworks that everyone is even interested in engaging with. Okay, so that's the first important point, and this is something that I will keep on coming back during my contributions on this panel, and that's what we really need to think about. We really need to remind ourselves that our perspective on the world is not the only, and it might be the most dominant at the moment, but that doesn't even mean it's not even a majority view. And it also doesn't mean that it should be like that. Okay, so now so what do faith actors what do faith actors do that don't want to engage in MEL? Well, they have their own systems of accountability and learning, right? And when I spoke with some of them, we had faith actors from Asia where this came up in particular, and they were like, no, Jennifer, we're not interested in MEL. We don't need MEL. We do accountability and learning, but we have our own ways that are rooted in our faith traditions. And what you talk about, yeah, it sounds kind of interesting, but frankly, no, thank you. And if these are organizations that rely on community funding, right, that don't need institutional funding from some of the big, usually northern donors, then they're quite fine, right? And they don't need that. And they have other ways of ensuring accountability, and they are accountable towards their communities who also don't speak this NGO language, right? So that's the first point. But then obviously you do, there is a whole spectrum, right? And there are some organizations that are completely in line with these NGO frameworks, right? These northern and secular frameworks, and some of them who are part of it, some who are a bit on the margins, but they do want to engage, and they're really trying hard to engage. And something they all report back to us is the dominance of secular and northern actors, right? Which at times can be a real, can lead to real struggles of local actors, local faith actors. Yeah, just because, and I'll just be very clear and blunt about it, because I think we need to be clear and blunt when we speak about this. There is no point in beating around the bush. We need to say it as it is. A lot of secular and northern actors, sort of secular northern donors, have quite strong views. They have clear agendas. They know what they want with little flexibility. And in lots of cases, there is not a lot of space for priority of locals. And this is a real problem, because the MEL systems, and we're speaking about MEL now, but this is really a wider issue in the sector. The MEL systems that these donors then develop, they're often not in line with the priorities or capacities of local faith actors. And we then have buzzwords in the sector like participation, localization. If people are really daring, they might even say decolonization. But unfortunately, we see it in lots of cases, these simply remain buzzwords, right? And there's quite a bit of really interesting literature about, about all of these terms. But we can really see that, again, there is a spectrum, right? When people use a term like participation, for some people, this simply means inviting someone to sit on a panel, say a few words, right? Engagement with faith actors, we invite like a big name. It's usually he, sits on a panel, says a few words, and that's it. And that's our engagement. It's our religious engagement, right? And yeah, and that's where the spectrum starts, and it can then but it can also go all the way, and it should go all the way, right, to truly participatory approaches where when we work together from the very beginning, and we are partners, partners of equal footing. We're speaking about challenges now. Unfortunately, we don't see this very often. We keep on hearing this from our partners. We keep on hearing this. We have been trying at JLI to do things differently. We are obviously also part of the same systems as everyone else. We are exposed to the same pressures, right, and expectations. But we've really been trying to change the way we work in the last 3 years. And so even with these very, very small efforts that we've made and the very small achievements that we have made in these few years, the feedback that we get from our local partners is overwhelmingly positive, and they literally tell us there is no one like you. We don't work with any, and that's not to say there's no one else who is doing good work, right? That's not what I'm trying to say here. But what I'm trying to say is that lots of local faith actors, they have very, very, very few interactions with secular, with northern donors, where there is not a very clear power imbalance, right? And if someone makes even just very small efforts, like we have been trying at JLI, then this is so different from what people usually do that it's really, really, really noticeable and remarkable. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Sorry, I forgot to look at the time. I think I'm almost have I almost reached the limit. Yeah, I think I had around 5 minutes. Sorry, Soraf.
No,
so basically that's what I would say, right? The local, it's basically marginalization. So local faith actors, they one of their biggest challenges is that they feel marginalized, and that their perspectives and their views, their priorities, their capacities are simply not centered. But it's secular and northern partner donors or partners views that usually dominate, with little flexibility, as I said, with other agendas. Yeah.
Absolutely, Jennifer. Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly summarize some of what you're saying, which I think is really interesting and valid. I mean, first of all, is like helping us question our own assumption around whether faith actors, especially in local communities, want to do MEL the way that we perceive it in the global north. Also, asking us to question our assumption that, we might not even be the majority view. You also kind of talked about how a lot of faith actors have their own systems of accountability and learning, which we need to center and prioritize. But you also said that there are lots of faith actors that are willing to engage and have provided some good feedback about some of the work that JLI is doing with them. So I'm really grateful for your contribution. I would love to sort of pose this question to Halima, who is a researcher as well, about sort of the challenges that you've seen of doing MEL with faith actors. I would love to get your perspective, Halima, if you would like to add anything to what Jennifer has been saying so far. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarab, and thank you, Jennifer, for starting us off on this. I completely agree with some of the things you have raised. And for me, especially as a local faith actor now coming from the global south, I think where I would like to start with is the fact that for a lot of faith actors who are engaging in religious peace building or interreligious peace building and trying to utilize their faith background for development work, when they start out, most of us, because now I'm one of them, most of us know nothing about MEL as the North knows it. Most of us do not even care about MEL. We just care about the problem. We care about the violent extremism in our homes and in our backyards, and the drug problems and the gender-based violence and the youth restiveness. And we are looking at how do we solve this problem. So from that background, we're just looking at the problem in front of us and how we want to tackle that problem. And whatever resources would help us in order to be able to do that. And so monitoring, evaluation, and learning is at the back burner in that kind of situation. So it's a little bit like somebody who is like struggling for survival. So that is one big challenge, that we are at this stage where we are concerned about solving the problem, and that's what we are quite focused on. But then the organizations that want to assist us come, and it's like, yes, you also have to do this. And sometimes it's viewed as a waste of time, a waste of resources. And okay, the time and resources we are spending on this could actually go into solving the actual problem, which is what we're concerned about. So that is one challenge that local faith actors especially have when it comes to the issue of MEL. Now, the second stage is fine. We've been able to convince local faith actors on the need for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and how it is beneficial even to their own work and to work in other places. And fine, they're ready to do this. Then the first, another challenge, the next layer of challenge is the fact that the MEL systems, especially from the global north, is very, very complex for a lot of local faith actors to understand. They do not have background in this kind of studies and surveying and statistics and data collection and analysis and all of this. A lot do not even have that background, do not have that training. So the complexity is then something else that we have to deal with when we are ready to even do this at all. And then as we try to navigate that complexity, to learn, to try to adapt, to integrate some of this into our work, then another level comes, which is the level where there is no single, while there are some uniformity in some things and some standards in the development work, different institutional donors have different templates and different ways by which they do their own MEL and how they want the organizations that they are working with to do the MEL and reporting and all of that. And then that poses another level of challenge. It's one that we don't even think that we should be spending a lot of resources on this. Then you're able to convince us. We're trying to learn, and then you come up with new systems, new softwares, new tools that we have to learn. We have to continually learn and adapt, and in order to be able to keep up. Otherwise, it might be difficult to really get the support that we need for the work at hand. And sometimes this can actually be very frustrating to a lot of local faith actors who feel that there seems to be no end to this continuous learning and having to just adapt in order to be able to fit into the template of what the northern NGOs and institutional donors really want. And so for local faith actors, I think these are some of the challenges that we face. And also, just to wrap up, is also the understanding that when it's, especially with local faith actors, there are levels. So while I would consider myself a local faith actor, for example, I am still operating on a different level and plane than the imam or the pastor within some of the cities in Nigeria. And those imams and pastors are also operating on a different level to the imams and the pastors in the rural areas and the traditional leaders and religious leaders in the rural areas. So the level of access, the level of knowledge, the ease of adopting technologies, and the ease of being willing to embrace change is different across that levels. And we also have to realize that the best evidence and learning with regards to change, especially when it comes to this issue of religious peace building, has to come from the local. And the more local it is, the better for all of us. So we also, especially from the global north perspective, need a lot of patience to realize that we can't just be working with some NGOs in some of the global north that has staff who have their bachelors and their masters, and some of them from foreign countries, and think that we are already fully engaging local faith actors. So we have to be patient enough to ensure that engagement goes as further as possible down the level of local, in order for us to really be able to get quality data and real learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Halima. Really excellent points. I just want to highlight a couple of ones that especially stood out from all the amazing points that you made. I think the one that stands out for me is like the best evidence should come from folks that are on the ground, from the locals, and we should center their perspectives, but also should be patient enough with our engagement with local actors, and also this conversation, especially around how different institutional donors have different templates that are forced upon a lot of local actors that may make it difficult for them. And just like Jennifer suggested, sometimes MEL is not a priority, given that a lot of times for faith actors, they are on the front lines of solving some of these issues. So also, again, reminding us to sort of hold that assumption in mind as we sort of critically reflect on this work. So those were all excellent inputs, Halima. So I really thank you so much. I'm going to go and pose this question to Sharon. Sharon, of course, you work with Search, which is one of the biggest NGOs in the world, but also you've had years of experience engaging with faith actors in peace building work. So I would love to be able to bring your experience and perspective on this, and love your reflections and thoughts on this question about challenges faith actors face.
Thank you very much, Sarav, and thank you, Jennifer and Halima, for kicking us off this way. It's great to be with everybody here. I actually don't think you're going to hear that much different from me, but perhaps I will frame it slightly differently, but generally the points are the same points that we have heard already. Search for Common Ground is not a faith-based organization, as you mentioned, but it is the largest one dedicated to peace building. And it clearly can't do its work around the world without working with religious actors. And we, like many other organizations and institutions like USAID, realized over recent years that we needed to improve our own understanding and sensitivity to build our own religious literacy that would make our work more effective and impactful in building peace. And the fact that over the past 6 years, our work in religious engagement initiatives has expanded from 2 to 3 countries to over 20 testifies to the fact that an international strategy is deeply needed to work in this field, not only as it relates to religious freedom, which we've all seen has become such a major focus of many governments, whether for or against, but religious engagement as a whole. And our growth has also offered us the opportunity to see the wide range of challenges that faith actors face when doing monitoring, evaluation, and learning MEL. So I would gather the challenges into 4 categories. And as I say, we've heard them already from Jennifer and from Halima, but within these categories, it kind of helps to perhaps clarify them further. The first category is meaning and language. In many cases, words have different meanings for different people. And I often find myself in the role of translator, especially between religious and secular, in order to reach the essence of a meaning. What I mean by this, for example, is when we want to evaluate knowledge acquisition, I often hear religious people say, well, what is true knowledge? It can only come through belief in God, or only pertains to knowledge of sacred texts. And what is true dialogue? It's only when we truly see the dignity of the other as being created in the divine image. And then what's freedom? It's not giving human rights to all so they can behave how they choose. Freedom is the human responsibility to behave according to God's commandments. And then what's peace? It's not social cohesion, as secular people might call it, but living side by side with separate schooling and no assimilation while respecting the other's dignity. We need to find a language and a dialogue that allows for the essential meaning of what we want to evaluate to emerge. The second category I would put into the frame of time frames. Too often, evaluation of results are framed narrowly. Projects are funded for 2 to 3 years, if we're lucky 5, and we are expected to show sustained transformation during that time. But what is time and change for religious people who look at a whole life and even the afterlife as a journey of spiritual growth? How do we frame those indicators to measure the changes we want to see, especially if sustained change takes a lifetime? The third category is localization, and we've heard from also Halima specifically talking about it, and I think we all understand and have internalized the fact that for sustained change to take place, there needs to be an ownership at the local level. It can't be imposed from above. Understanding both the context and what is possible is essential, and that is best done locally. However, here comes the rub, because local organizations or religious actors often don't have the capacity to do monitoring, evaluation, and learning. They don't have the tools in the way the donors want it, which sets up further challenges about how to make localization really work to measure impact, something that Halima was talking about before. And then the last category are issues around conflicts of interests and politics. When personal transformation does take place among religious actors, they often fear for their own religious standing and influence in the communities, and that holds them back from passing on the evidence of that impact to their communities. Fear of religious ostracization is a powerful thing, and I've actually seen it firsthand in various places where the religious leaders themselves or religious actors have seen how much they themselves have changed, and yet they just have too much fear to make that change in their communities. They find themselves on the extreme of their communities, and that the communities are simply not ready because they haven't gone through the same process that they have. So I think it's really important to look at those 4 categories to recognize the challenges that we are seeing amongst religious actors. They're not the only ones, but they are 4 main ones that I've seen.
Great. Thank you so much, Sharon. And I just want to sort of summarize what you just spoke about and put really succinctly. So the 4 categories that I heard was language. You mentioned timeline. You mentioned sort of these conversations around and localization, but also sort of some of these issues around conflict of interest and politics that sort of takes place in the context that we work in. So I really appreciate that input, Sharon. Great learning from you. And yeah, I'm gonna pose this question to Antoine. Antoine, I would love your reflections on this issue. Yeah, I would love to get your thoughts and reflections, really. So over to you.
Thank you. Work for the mission, and we have been working with faith actors for many years, and here in the MENA region, working in Egypt, in Syria, in Jordan, and Lebanon, and Iraq. I would like to share with you some of our comments on what kind of challenges our faith actors are facing in doing monitoring and evaluation from, as I mentioned, we at the Mission We Work, we approach all the relief and humanitarian and development from a faith-based perspective. So maybe I have here five main challenges. The first one, in terms of knowledge, I would say that access to monitoring and evaluation and learning resources here in the MENA are very rarely available in our local language, in Arabic. So this in terms of knowledge. In terms of know-how, I will be repeating what Jennifer and Halima mentioned about in terms of know-how. There is a lack of capacity building on monitoring and evaluation methods. But I would say at the same time that local faith actors are doing monitoring and evaluation, but here the terminology that Jennifer mentioned, it's about using their local approach, their context-driven language, without referring by book to the international humanitarian system language. So for example, just to give you an example, they might not call it monitoring or evaluation, but they are always on the ground following up closely with their local communities. So this is the subject of terminology. And in terms of budget constraint, I would like to stress on what Halima mentioned, that because local faith actors and faith-based organizations, mostly they have limited funding. So I will repeat what Halima mentioned. Most of them, they prefer to allocate this budget for relief, development, and humanitarian work on the ground, rather than doing complex monitoring and evaluation, implementation, and reporting, just for this budget constraint. This was highly common between the actors that we hosted with the Joint Learning Initiative during the Middle East listening dialogues on the MEL and faith in Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. So the fourth challenge is in terms of donor requirement. They are very demanding and complicated, and this is what complexity that Halima mentioned, complexity. I can add the tight deadline, the many form to be filled in, the reporting mechanism, which is not flexible and time consuming. And we as local faith actors, we don't see the value behind these complex requirements. And the last challenge is about the donors' top-down approach. I would say that many funding applications come from a top-down approach where international donors have already set up the theory of change, the logical framework, the indicators. At this point, local faith actors are not involved in designing the monitoring and evaluation framework of their project, and they don't feel the sense of project ownership. So just to sum up, these are the main 5 challenges: the knowledge, know-how, budget constraint, donors complexity, and the top-down approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine. You did my job for me, made it a little easier. So thank you for providing that summary as well. Really great inputs from everyone, and also lots of commonalities, common threads that I saw through this conversation. I wonder if I could move over. So of course, we talked about perhaps local actors or local faith actors not necessarily wanting to do MEL, but even when they want to do MEL, it's on their own terms. So I wonder if you could provide an example about any successful MEL partnerships that you may have seen. I'm just going to read out the questions just so that it's really clear. So what does a successful MEL partnership with local faith actors look like? I would love to get your thoughts on this. And I just want to rotate around the speakers. So Halima, if you could talk about a good partnership that you've seen in your experience as a researcher and peace builder.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would just talk about my experience, my organization, and our experience in this area. Like I mentioned, my organization, the Dharma Institute, has been existing for over 50 years now, and we've been doing a lot of things. We've been working on religious literacy, peace building, and doing all sorts of things to solve problems in our own community as they come up. And then at some point, we started to have interactions with international NGOs from the global north, and then recognized the importance of MEL, and we realized, okay, this is something we want to do. This is something beneficial. This is something important. And the experience we had then, we were working with a few NGOs, notably the Tony Blair Institute for Change in the UK, and they had funding from GHR Foundation. And what they provided for us was true accompaniment. And there wasn't a top-down approach. So it was really a situation where they provided us with the necessary training, the necessary technical support that we needed. And it wasn't just like taking away the agency of the local faith actors, but recognizing the agency, the knowledge, the expertise of the local faith actors, and then providing the support in those areas where they do not necessarily have strength, like MEL. So at the initial stage, for example, there was a lot of travels from the technical team of the Tony Blair Institute to Nigeria to support our program. So yes, we were doing some things online, but then they were also coming and supporting us. And so there was learning by doing, and with support of people who were already knowledgeable at this. So that made it a little bit easier for us. And then there was also a kind of what I'll call gradual winning. So it was not, like I said, we were being empowered. So we had our own, so as a result of that, we also had a monitoring and evaluation team who were working closely with the technical team from these organizations, and they were able to get the support that they needed. And then with time, we could do a lot of these things on our own. So it was like I said earlier, it requires patience, but then it pays off at the end, because within a few years, then the local faith actors are not only able to do this on their own, but also able to build the capacity of others, which is what we've been able to do. So we have gotten to the stage now whereby we have one of the most developed program management and monitoring and evaluation systems for faith-based work in Nigeria. And then we are also able to conduct training to other local and community-based organizations, not just on MEL, but also on program design and implementation and monitoring and reporting, the entire spectrum of project implementation, from conceptualization down to reporting and closing the project. So we were able to learn through the accompaniment and support provided by this organization, but it was done in a way that was very empowering and not very the neoliberal top-down approach. And it was also done in a way that we were able to take it up from them, and we're also able to build the capacity of others, and we have been doing that. And like I mentioned earlier, there is levels to being local. So my level of local is different from the level of local of others, and recognizing that we are also able to provide training for people, faith actors who are even more local than we are, because they come from those specific communities. So we've organized MEL training for people from specific communities that we work in, so that at the end of the day, they are the ones who are doing the MEL work on the ground. And also, they know their context better, even more than we do, even though we are all from the same country. So I think this is something that I have seen that it has worked. And it is also a template that I think can be replicated in other places. And so the importance of accompaniment is very, very important. Also, another thing that is important in successful MEL partnership is the definition of success or impact. Like, who defines what success is? Who determines that a program or a project is successful or not? Definitely, this cannot be something that would be concluded somewhere in Brussels or the US or the UK, and then we just come to Nigeria to implement. Definitely, there has to be a lot of input from the local partners in the determination of what does success mean to them, what does peace look like to them, what does interreligious harmony look like to them, what are their own indicators of peace, of interreligious harmonious living within their communities. And this would inform the indicators that the MEL would be watching out for. But where we have the northern NGOs or the donors coming with their own templates, with their own standard indicators of what we should be looking out for, in a lot of cases, we miss out on very important feedback, on very important learning, on a lot of critical success factors because we're looking in the wrong direction. So I think it's really important. I understand also that there is a need for some form of uniformity for the purpose of being able to compare between contexts and to be able to adopt and adapt the learning of one place to the other. But I think it's actually important to be able to find that sweet spot where we have some level of uniformity, but at the same time, a level of flexibility that allows for local ownership and also local inputs in what their definition of success is.
Fabulous. Thank you, Halima. Definitely a couple of points I wanted to highlight once again. So Halima mentioned sort of a good practice was true accompaniment, which is not a top-down approach. I mean, the way that I conceive of accompaniment is literally like walking alongside someone. So that's sort of the image I have of when the word accompaniment comes up, and Halima shared that was a really good practice that was helpful for her organization. And then by emphasizing accompaniment, the organizations that were supporting Halima, did not take the agency. So recognizing the agency of local faith actors while providing support, she mentioned as being a good practice. Also, I really loved your point around sort of emphasis on how MEL is not just research. Faith actors should be part of the whole project cycle, from the planning phase, determining goals, indicators of success, and all of that. So I think that, again, is a really important point in terms of best practice, is ensuring the participation of faith actors at the beginning of the process, and making sure that they're part of defining success, in a process. So those were really great points that I wanted to highlight. So thank you so much, Halima. I want to hand it over to Sharon. Sharon, I wonder if you could share your reflections and thoughts on what has success looked like in your experience of doing MEL with faith actors.
Well, I think it's really interesting that even though I'm going to be talking about a different project, clearly this process that Halima spoke about is a very similar process to what we're going through, and that's why it is successful in the way it is. I was actually going to speak about something else, which I'm going to keep for a third question now, but I will talk about a couple of projects that we are running. First of all, a project called JISRA, that is the Joint Initiative for Strategic Religious Action. It's a 5-year Dutch-funded project. It's run through a consortium, but we have 50 local organizations as part of this project, and it is spread over 7 countries. So as you can imagine, the context of each country is very different. They're spread over Africa and the Middle East and Asia. And what is successful about it so far is that the actual work that's implemented on the ground is carried out by the local organizations who really understand their contexts, and they are supported and accompanied, those words that Halima used, by the consortium partners in order to help make sure that we can provide the services that are needed, like the trainings. We've providing advocacy training as requested, or we're providing the common ground approach to religious engagement as requested. But it is they who know what is best for their own needs, that they make the decision on how they're going to go about working. We have provided a general framework, but the funders and the consortium leads have really given it into the hands of the local people, of the local organizations, to carry out the work. And just to give you one example that we have done in Nigeria, we have a very specific focus also on working with young people and working with women within this framework of advancing religious freedom or freedom of religion or belief in the 7 countries. And in Nigeria, where we've been working, young people have successfully advocated to their local authorities for better electricity access for the entire community, regardless of ethnicity or religion. Now, I think that if this had been an indicator or decision that had been made far away in the north, we would never have focused on providing better electricity for everybody. We would talk about, ensuring that there is a freedom of religion, that people were able to practice their religion. But this, they said, was their need. They wanted better electricity for all. Why? Because it actually increases opportunities for young people to earn a livelihood, thus reducing their vulnerability to radicalization or engagement in activities that harm fall. And because it was done for the whole community, regardless of religion or ethnicity, it's actually combated interreligious tensions over access to resources. And the successful advocacy messages came out of the advocacy skills that were provided to them through the trainings. So here I think it's a very clear and concrete success that happened in one place through a decision that the young people took themselves about what they needed in order to improve their lives. Another example is we have been setting up interreligious freedom roundtables in Uzbekistan, in Sri Lanka, and Lebanon with DRL funding. And some of the key informant interviewees that provided information for our baseline assessment on how to set up the roundtable itself, they went on to become members of the roundtable. So they not only felt an ownership, but they could see how their input, concerns, and issues and challenges that they identified were practically addressed at the round table. So again, it is this enabling the ownership by listening to what the specific needs are of the people who are taking part in the projects. And I think it's very interesting to note that in all 3 roundtables that we've set up, the contexts are very different, and the round tables are extremely different as well. They're run in a different way, their processes are different because the needs are different. And it's through listening to the needs of the people on the ground that we can actually see some successes.
Thank you for those reflections, Sharon. I was especially struck, again, you mentioned the word accompaniment, but I was especially and I made a note of it, I was especially struck by your use of the word as requested. That to me stood out because I think that's, in terms of accompaniment, I feel like that's the main sort of takeaway is it's at someone's request, not an imposition in a sense. It's when someone asks for your support in that way. And and taken together, I think your some of the activities that you mentioned, listening to communities, and I think I also want to mention the providing very specific material support around electricity. You said, I think you mentioned, only when asked. I think that was for me like a key takeaway from your reflections. So again, really appreciate your thoughts. And I will move on to Antoine. Antoine, I know you have a couple of things to share here too, as you reflect on some best practice. So I'll hand you the reins of the session and ask you to share some of your sort of best practices in engaging with faith actors and doing MEL. Over to you, Antoine.
Yes, absolutely. I would like to share with you a successful how the mission, monitoring and evaluation partnership with local faith actors look like. I will share with you one of our outcome harvesting case study in Egypt involving local faith actors in providing evidence about faith action in humanitarian relief and peace building. I will share my screen with you. I don't know if you are able to see my screen. Yes. Okay. This is a project funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Denmark, DENIDA, under the Danish Arab Partnership Program. The project entitled Leaders for Building the Egyptian Society. The project involved Muslim and Christian religious leaders. It joined together 100 Muslim and Christian religious leaders, including female Muslim women preachers, and 100 scholars, students from both religious institutions. So, and the project focused on interfaith dialogue, conflict resolution, countering hate speech, relief, and gender-inclusive religious peace building. We were involved together in outcome harvesting as evidence-based evaluation approach to show the impact of interreligious, multi-religious action across the humanitarian, relief, and peace-building sectors, noting that this project was implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's why it's called for relief intervention. During the outcome harvesting session, we were located in a retreat center between Cairo and Alexandria in the desert. In a center, in this retreat center, the participants were split into focus group discussion, discussing the project impact on the personal, institutional, and community level. And during the outcome harvesting session, the participants showcased the initiatives they conducted in relief, humanitarian, and peace building, and they reported on the changes that made through evidence-based approach. As you can see, they are using pictures, testimonials, interviews, all these kind of monitoring and evaluation tools. So, and this is one of the initiatives reported during the COVID-19, where we can see the Muslim woman preacher and the sister going to the hospital in Minya just to stand together with the nurses and the doctors to encourage them during the epidemic coupled. Noting that during the outcome harvesting session, which was conducted over 2 days, we stayed together overnight. We have enjoyed together. You can see here a brother from the Coptic Orthodox Church playing together with Muslim sheikh during evening and doing some handcraft, as you can see, about the interfaith dialogue between Muslim and Christian. So this is what I would like to share I wanted to share with you about this initiative. So I will see how I will stop sharing my screen. Is it okay?
Yep.
So
thank you.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you sharing some of those pictures. It's always good to get those visuals, yeah, interesting to take a look. So thank you for sharing that that experience of outcome harvesting, which is, I found to be a really sort of really accessible tool that we can use with with especially faith actors or local actors, and it really helps folks think strategically about sort of changes in behavior, attitudes, and things of that nature. So thank you so much for sharing, Antoine. Jennifer, over to you. I would love to pick your brain about some good practice you've seen, some of the work of JLI. I hope you can highlight. I've especially been following closely your regional hubs, so I would love to learn more about some of your work and some of the best practice you've seen.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Sorav. And that's exactly what I thought I'd do, to tell you a little bit more about our work at JLI. So as Sorav mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'm Senior Research Fellow at the Joint Learning Initiative on Faith and Local Communities, which is a very long name. So those in the know, just say JLI, because that's much shorter. And I wanted to tell you about some of our capacity sharing and joint learning work around MEL and faith. So we at JLI, a lot of our work is centered around what we call shared learning hubs, which is really groups of researchers, practitioners, policymakers, either from faith backgrounds or secular backgrounds, but who all have an interest in issues related to development, humanitarian action, peace building, or religious community work more generally, as it intersects with faith. So we've had around 10 shared learning hubs in the past, on forced migration and faith, on ending violence against children and faith, on GBV and faith. And in autumn 2019, we then set up a hub on MEL and faith. The hubs are usually, or traditionally, they have been attended by people from all over the world, people who work in smaller grassroots organizations or in bigger NGOs, who work for governments or as researchers. And people then in the hubs, they plan research together, they plan the gathering and generation of evidence. Oh, I see Sorav has put the link to the hub in the chat. That's great. Thank you, Sorav. And so this is how the hubs have traditionally worked. But we then realized that that one issue that we were facing with the hub work was that when you just open up a space that anyone can attend, you often end up in a situation where there is still certain groups that dominate. And that's very much what happened with the hub as well. So we ended up having great people with really good experience and interesting perspectives. But the majority of them were people based in the global north. The majority of them were people who either worked with big NGOs or universities. And yeah, of course, also people who were fluent in English, right? And while this it was still a great space for joint learning and capacity sharing, for engagement, exchange, right, and producing evidence together. We thought there was something missing. So 3 years now. 3 years ago, we then we changed the approach of JLI as a whole. We decided that we needed to pay much more attention to shifting resources, decision making, and leadership from the global north to the global south, from international actors to local actors, at least to the extent that it was possible for us in the spaces that we were active in. And we started setting up regional hubs. We started setting up regional hubs with partners from the region, and because we ourselves, we were often not from those parts of the world. The very first step that we took was to start with what we call the listening dialogue. Okay, so we said there seems to be an interest, right? We were approached by people because there seems to be an interest in a specific topic. For example, MEL and faith. Now, who are the people on the ground we could work with? And who are, what are the specific issues that people are concerned about? So there was a sustained process of engagement, right? So this obviously required time. It required resources, which, if you ask me about successful MEL partnerships, it's very, very hard to get there without factoring these in, right? It involves following the lead of local actors and supporting them where and as required, right? So there's a bit of a balance. This goes back a little bit to what Halima said before about supporting people and working with them and giving them space without dominating yourself, but still providing the support as it's needed. We set up a number of different regional and local hubs with our partners across the world, and one of those was our Middle East shared learning hub, which focuses on MEL and faith in the Middle East. Now, what is different in this hub is that hub membership is only available to people who are based in the region. We currently work with a group of practitioners and local faith actors from Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Antoine is actually one of our members, so it's great to see him here and hear him speak about his work and experience. And the work takes place in Arabic, because that's the language of our local partners, and there is no need to bring a group of people from the region together when their shared language is Arabic and then make them speak English just because we don't speak their language, right? Just because we are lacking something. Why should we then put this additional burden on them? The work has been led by our colleague Zeynep Shamoun, who, she's still in the call as one of the attendees. She refused to speak on the panel, so we're like, okay, we're not going to put you on the spot. But Zeynep is based in Lebanon herself. She has been, she's been coordinating the work, so a sustained process of engagement, a long-term approach, right? So you can't just go in there with 3 months of funding. No, it requires a little bit more than that. And then just an openness to work with people. And I mean, this is actually again, a principle that should inform our partnerships more generally, picking up people where they are, right? Not going in there and having expectations, okay, this is where we need to go. No, we see where are people, what are their priorities, and then how can we work together, and how can we walk this path together? Lima said that it requires patience with local faith actors. I would actually add to that and say this kind of work actually also requires patience with northern actors, because looking at where they are and what they are lacking can be quite exasperating sometimes, right? So let's get away from this mindset of, oh, it's people in the global south or it's people on the local level who are lacking. No, like it's all of us who can learn from each other. And if we are not willing to accept that, then are we really interested in fair, equitable, and participatory partnerships? Yeah, and sometimes this kind of work gives us reason to exasperate. But we also, I want to finish on a slightly more positive note. So I'm also going to refer to some research that Soraf and I have been doing together. So this is a piece of work that emerged from the previous global JLI MEL Hub. So the global MEL Hub still exists, right? We started the work in the Middle East with a group of colleagues and partners from there. But at the same time, we said we do want to keep the other space because there are also people who benefit. So that's still ongoing. And as part of that global MEL Hub work, we, Soraf and his colleagues at AFP approached us, and we did a small study where we looked at donors' perceptions of local and international MEL partnerships. So the hub itself had focused on the local faith actor perspective so far, and we then said, okay, but what about the donors? And we interviewed a number of different donors, bilateral donors, NGO donors, foundation donors, and I think I've seen at least one person in the audience who we also engaged with as part of the research. We are currently still in the process of going through the findings, but we hope to be able to share them very soon. And it was actually quite interesting to see that there is also willingness on the side of the donors to be more participatory and inclusive, so increased willingness, right? Still small steps, and we're still not where we would like to be, but hopefully things are slowly but surely changing, and people, interestingly, it was especially the private foundations who obviously have the most room to maneuver and try out new things, that were the most willing to engage in different types of MEL partnerships. And I'll stop there for now.
Amazing. Thank you so much for mentioning that research, Jennifer. And thank you also for sort of making sure we say we have patience with actors in the global north as well, because I'm reminded of this saying that says, all our liberation is tied together. So I appreciate you mentioning everyone. So thank you for mentioning that research as well. So that was a quite positive note, but I'm hoping to get into a even more positive direction, I hope, with the next question. I'm going to start with Sharon. Sharon, I wonder if you could reflect on or share with folks about what can sort of Northern INGOs or foundations, as Jennifer spoke about, or institutional donors, what can we do to prioritize local knowledge, epistemology, and practices? I wonder if you could give advice. I know you have a wealth of experience on this issue, so I would appreciate your take here. You are muted, Sharon.
After all these years, and I still forget to unmute myself. I guess Search is definitely a Northern INGO because our headquarters are in Washington and in Brussels, but we do have many offices around the world, and 90% of the people who work in our offices are local. So I think that local aspect of Search has really helped us to understand this problem quite well. And we are in that position where we're both working as, consortium leaders with local organizations, but of course our funding comes from governments, so we need to also answer to the needs of our funders. Over the past couple of years, we have really challenged ourselves to find a simple but effective way to measure the impact of our peace-building efforts around the world. And although what I'm going to talk about is Search mechanism or format, we spoke to many, many different organizations, and we're actually working together with them to create something that we have called the Peace Impact Framework, PIF. And we did that because we found that our research measures were high level, and we didn't have standard indicators to measure peace gains writ large. And we weren't clearly taking into account the decision points of our practitioners. Practitioners got very little say in setting the strategies and standards, something we've been talking about over the last hour or so. But those who are most affected by the conflict are actually getting even less say. And we found that reporting had become the priority, but we weren't sure if we were making the right investments for peace. So we've developed this Peace Impact Framework. I'm not going to go into all the details because I have provided a 2-page summary of it, which Sarav, I hope you'll share with everybody. And the director of our ILT institutional learning team is happy, her email's on it, and she'll be happy to provide more information because it's something that we'd really like to share out with many organizations. But it's based on 3 pillars from which knowledge is generated. Excuse me. And we use them to create successful MEL partnerships. These 3 pillars are lived experience, first of all, and I think that this has the most relevance to what we're talking about this evening. We ask people we're working with what impact would look like for them. And this provides the indicators that come from the community themselves. So, of course, context is highly relevant. The second pillar is that we have 5 aligned measures across all our projects, which provides for a global consistent language, and there are 10 simple indicators. Again, I won't go into that at the moment, but the third pillar is expert observation and shared reflection, which collects outcomes systematically across the organization. And if Antoine talked about outcome harvesting, that's of course something that we very much use as well within this. So what we're doing is we're now focusing much more on participatory and qualitative evaluation methods that we find are more effective when working with religious actors than counting the numbers and the outputs. You know, we've reached 1,000 people, we've done 10,000 this, we've done 500 workshops or whatever. I mean, of course, these things are important, but really to measure what change has really happened, we found that qualitative research and evaluation methods are so much more useful. And we use all this whole process to document and explore changes linked to attitudes and behaviors that's more geared towards reflection and learning. And so this is really the direction that we have gone into, and we would like to share it with others. We think that if Northern NGOs or funders take on this form of MEL practice, we will see quite a big difference in the way that our initiatives, all our initiatives and all our efforts are evaluated, and hopefully more effectively.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I just to let you know, I shared some of the resources that you shared in the chat. So thank you so much for mentioning them, and hope you all can get access to these resources. Moving along, I want to pose this to Antoine as well. Antoine, I wonder if you could shed some of your opinion or thoughts about how we can prioritize local knowledge, local practices and epistemologies, perhaps some advice to all of us who work in the global north here.
Yes, just a couple of things that I can put it this way. The first one is about localization, about terminology, framework, approach. I would, if the Northern INGO can search for a common ground between the common language and approach between local faith actors, how they are doing the faith-sensitive monitoring and evaluation and learning in compliance with scientific standards, and at the same time, context-driven and locally rooted. So this is number one. A common ground in terms of terminology, methodology, approach, and language. And number two, it's to be to focus more on capacity sharing rather than capacity building. I will develop this point now, and this is what we are trying to do with our membership with the Joint Learning Initiative in Middle East Learning Hub on MEL and faith. As you know, the hub was launched in July 2022, and it brings together both faith and secular local actors to engage in a process of capacity sharing and shared learning about MEL resources from local perspective through localization and based on our own understanding about the priorities of our MENA region. This space is not dominated by voices from international organizations. Practically speaking, within the GLI Middle East Learning Hub on MEL and faith, we will work on producing a couple of things. A guide on MEL and faith, Christian and Muslim perspective, and that in collaboration with our local actors from Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Lebanon, who will be the main inspiration and source of knowledge, and their experience will shape this guide. And number two, additionally, the GLI will launch a call for proposals where the hub members will pitch their own small learning project and receive unconditional and flexible funding from the GLI to implement these projects. These learning projects will become case studies and live experiences about MEL and faith. So these just in summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine. Thanks for highlighting some amazing initiatives, and I'm looking forward to following them as well. Jennifer, over to you. I wonder if you had any advice to folks in the global north. Yeah, we'd love your thoughts.
Great, thank you, Saurabh. Yeah, so I have two steps here, and the first one would be for people to look internally, right? So there is yeah, so that's really the first step that I would advise people to undertake, to actually look at what are we currently doing, what have we been doing. I mean, this institutional memory is often not all in one place, so do bring it all together. The data is often not there. This is something that also came up in the interviews that you and I were conducting with donors when we asked them about their approaches to local international faith partnerships in MEL. So that's a gap, and that needs to be addressed by donors and by northern NGOs. Something that we did at GLI that we found quite helpful was to develop a matrix for what fair and equitable partnerships mean to us. This is not something that is exclusive for MEL partnerships, but something that we're trying to implement in our work more generally. But I could imagine that also to be helpful for people who want to improve their MEL work, right? What we did is we used an existing one from Justice, Funding Justice, which focused on funding partnerships, but we then adapted that to our needs. And we're planning to use that to assess our projects and initiatives. And then the other point, and we've already touched on that before, is to really ask yourself if you're ready to change the ways in which you work, right? So that's something that would be an exercise of reflection and an exercise of internal engagement within your organization. Are you ready to change the way you work, and are you ready to make an investment, right? So again, to use an example from our work at DJLI, when we decided to shift the focus of our joint learning hubs from the global level to the local and regional, we made a monetary investment, right? I mean, it doesn't come from nothing. And part of working with local partners and having and striving for fair and equitable partnerships is that you recompensate people for their time, right? That you don't expect them to make the time to lead activities or to speak at events without at least a token, right, of appreciation. That would be the internal, and then obviously the next step is external engagements. And I would really encourage people here, based on our experience at DJLI, to start by listening. Right? A lot of us are so used to going to a situation and with ready-made plans, and we know exactly what we want, and we know how we want this partnership to look like, and we have all these noble goals of participatory engagement and what have you. But participatory engagement is not us going into a partnership and being like, okay, it's going to be participatory now. Right? I mean, that's just not how it works. And this is really a learning process for a lot of us. For a lot of us in the North, for a lot of us white people, right? We're not used to sit back and listen and make space. Make space, let other people lead, right? Be there if you need it, but let other people lead. Can be really, really, really difficult if you're not used to it. Also, you need to ask yourselves if we are ready to be challenged. And if we are ready for different worldviews, even if they go completely against what we perceive to be standards and normal. But otherwise, I mean, I think we're not very likely to get to truly participatory, truly fair, truly equitable and inclusive partnerships. I've already spoken about the sustained engagement, right? That includes co-creating spaces. And what do I mean by co-create? It's another one of these buzzwords, but it means that we work together with our partners to create spaces where we can be challenged, right? Where they can tell us. And we've had this sort of situation with people where we acted as a donor toward some of our local, like very small donor, like we're speaking of like mini funding here, that we passed on to some of our local partners in the global South, and we had ideas and shared them with us. And then I remember that, like, our partner, he looked at us and he was like, no, Jennifer. Right? And then it was up to me to actually take a deep breath and be like, okay, what does he have to say? Right? And even if at first I don't understand it, I need to listen, and I need to put my views, my perspective, my assumptions on the back burner for a moment. So that's really the main points that I see. So there is an internal process, and then there are principles for external engagement with partners, colleagues, and friends.
Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, a good advice for us all, right? To help us get out of our comfort zone, like materially and emotionally as well. So that was very well taken. Halima, I'll let you have the last word. We're also coming to the end of the conversation, and I want to be respectful of your time, especially since it's late. So Halima, like I wonder what your advice is to everyone. Also want to acknowledge there were a couple of questions that we couldn't get to, but I thought the conversation was so rich. I hope I can answer these questions later on. But Halima, I'll let you have the last word. Do you have any advice for Northern institutions on how best to do this?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we've had very wonderful contributions so far. What I would add is just the acknowledgement and recognition of the agency of local faith actors, And where we have capable and knowledgeable local faith actors in MEL approaches and all of that, that they are allowed to take the lead in some of these initiatives. And this requires a high level of trust, which is something that unfortunately a lot of Northern NGOs do not yet have in local faith actors, and I think that's really very important. And related to that also is the issue of flexibility in MEL approaches to accommodate the cultural and religious sensitivities. Just because this is the way to do things here doesn't mean that it would be acceptable over there, and people have their own ways of doing things. For example, you could want to conduct a survey, for example, and yes, we want the inclusion of women, but we have to also be sensitive in how we go about it. It would be very challenging to send male enumerators to get the voices of women right in their homes. In northern Nigeria, for example, without having their male, like their husband, being present. And when you have their husband being present, that could also have effect on the kind of responses and content that you get from the women. So it's actually better to use women enumerators in that circumstances, so that you are able to take the man out and hear directly from the women. So that's just an example, and something that I think I talked about before because of the issue of time is the issue of technical support and training and accompaniment, and that this is done in a way that is very respectful and that is not very liberal or top-down approach. I think that's important. And lastly is the issue of being also flexible in the definition and definition of indicators of success, of what are we out to achieve, and what does success look like, and really engaging the local faith actors in determining these things from the very beginning, so that it's really truly a partnership and not just what we call a partnership, but it's not really a partnership of some, but really just bringing people together and getting them to do things the way you want them to do it. And I think if we're able to put all of this in place, hopefully we would be able to have even better partnerships and better outcomes going forward. Thank you very much.
Amazing, Halima. You know how they do mic drop. That was kind of like a mic drop moment right there. So thank you for your contribution. Awesome. Halima, Sharon, Jennifer, Antoine, really appreciate you, especially appreciate Sharon, Jennifer, and Antoine for staying well beyond what should be required. Again, apologies about that, but I didn't think I could do this without your all's contribution. So I do really appreciate that. I just wanted to share a couple of appreciating comments from the Q&A for you guys. You know, this was amazing. Thank you for all the amazing work and guidance. You made so many incredible points and cumulatively created an incredible shared vision. So I hope even that appreciation is worth you staying a little longer. But yeah, just deep gratitude and appreciation. And thank you all for joining. There's a networking session in 15 minutes, or now it's like 13 minutes. So I hope you can join us there. But I just want to say thank you and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for bringing us all together, Sorab.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you for your moderation, Sorab.
Oh, I appreciate it, you all. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Antoine.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.